We're back with Russell Mayeaux. Russell, we were talking about black mold before we left.
Right.
And is that the worst one? Is that the bad boy?
It's one of the top in the categories. It's one of the top that's really bad.
In this region here, or
well, this
everywhere?
region, well, pretty much. If you have the black mold, the Stachybotrys, then you have a severe problem. And believe it or not, to answer your question, 50% of homes in America now have a severe mold problem.
Wow.
So that severe could mean that you've got the Stachy or the Aspergillus or the Penicillium, and they each have their own genus levels. So they're all just as dangerous. But the black mold, I'm finding in about 40% of my inspections that I do locally, and that's a large number. So the black mold is very popular in this area. Wow.
And we have that because of some of the environmental things we talked about before.
Correct. You're dealing with the humidity. We're close to the waterfront, so you have a constant breeze coming in, bringing water in. The humidity. The number one thing the problems and that boils down to is our homes. We're building energy efficient, airtight.
Right. Absolutely.
What gets in can't get out. We carry mold spores in on our clothing, our pets, everything. So you open your door, mold spores come in. With the humidity inside the homes not being ventilated properly, then you've got a problem. That mold gets wet and it starts growing.
Okay. All right. So we were talking a little about how it got into our environments. Can you expand on that a little bit and tell us a little bit more about that? And like you said, we bring it in. So
right.
Is it so severe we should get rid of our cats? My cat comes in and out.
No, sir, not at all.
He's a little moldy too, as a matter of fact. I'm worried about him.
Believe it or not, pets are actually allergic to mold as well. I just found that out recently. But to answer your question, like you said, we bring it in our clothing. Every time we open our door, or we open our window on a nice sunny day, we're looking for fresh air. We open our window, mold spores come through the screen because they're tiny, microscopic. And so they can come through a screen. We open our door in and out, doing our yard work, or kids coming home from school, their backpacks are carrying mold spores. And your pet's taking them out for a walk, they'll bring it in.
And once it's in, what happens then?
Once it's in, it's airborne.
Right.
It's going to continue to float around your air until it gets to the point it has enough moisture. Once it has enough moisture, then it's going to start growing and producing. And as far as the black mold, it has to have a certain amount of water or moisture. It's a wet, sticky substance, so it's not airborne. It'll stick to a wall and it'll sit there and it'll grow. It can grow from the inside of your wall from a small water leak. And then about 6 weeks later, you start seeing the black on your wall, but it's coming from the inside. So, but it'll stay airborne until it has enough moisture. Once it gets enough moisture, it starts fruiting, and then it starts growing. And that's when it starts producing those mycotoxins that make it sick.
All right, so I guess that's the reason that we see mold around sinks and things where there's moisture more than you do, say, in the living room than...
Right. Now, the mold that you see around your like ceramic fixtures or tile fixtures, those molds are really not dangerous molds. That's more of a slime mold that grows, like on non-porous surfaces.
A slime mold.
Right. That's the real slimy, nasty one.
I know what you're talking about, yeah.
Those can just be wiped away, with cleaner. The other molds that we're talking about that they'll grow on non-porous material. Porous material, sorry.
Okay.
They'll grow on things that you can eat, like a cellulose product.
Oh, really?
And those are the ones that we have to be concerned with. And they can live in your carpets, they can live on your wall, and it just continue to grow.
But the ones that, I want to touch on this real quick. So the ones that are growing around your sink and a little bit of Clorox to clean that up, you don't have to worry about it too much. But the ones that are growing elsewhere are probably the ones that's going to be a problem. Let me ask you this now, who's at risk for health problems associated with exposure to the mold?
It's a very good question. The people that are most at risk are the immune suppressed people. That generally speaking is your children. They have a weaker immune system. They're not, fully grown yet and don't have the full immune yet that we have. So they tend to start having a lot of allergic problems and asthma problems at early ages. And then the other side is the senior citizens.
Oh, I see.
As they get older, their immune gets weaker. And then if they catch the flu quite easily. So they tend to get sick really fast and start having all kind of health problems.
Now, you mentioned earlier that some of your pets are affected by mold.
Believe it or not, they are. Pets are the number one source. If you have a real active dog, and all of a sudden he's starting to get lazy, doesn't do a lot, no energy no more, typically that's a sign of this dog has an allergic reaction to the mold.
And so where you keep your water dish and all those kind of things, should we be a little more careful about that than, and make sure that area stays clean? And will that affect it? I mean,
Well, anytime, even a fish tank can affect mold growth, believe it or not. So anytime you have water involved.
all right, now let me ask you this about the fish tank.
Right.
If you got a fish tank in there and there's mold growing in it, can that come out into the atmosphere?
No, sir, that's more of an algae.
Okay.
That's more of an algae. It's actually in the water. But when I stayed at the fish tank, what I mean there is people clean, they pulled things out.
Right.
They got carpet around, they're dripping water on the carpet.
Oh, yeah.
There's mold spores, the water makes them grow, activate. So that's why I said about the fish tank.
I usually drink the water out of my fish tank.
That's okay, it's clean water, right?
I just want to make sure, so I do that. All right, so people who are at risk with health problems and that are associated with exposure to mold, those people really need to be more careful.
They need to be more careful, but again, I want to stress one point here. We all breathe air every day, so we're all at risk. But the weaker immune are at more risk than we are. But we have our bodies. I'll kind of tell you real quick. It's like a barrel. We're hairsprays and this and that, so our barrel starts filling up. So even though we have a strong immune system, our barrel is going to get full one day. And that one slight, you walk into a room and that one slight mycotoxin may just tip your barrel over. You may overflow. So what happens is over a period of time, we're ingesting these things, and people with strong immune systems can actually reach a point where they become sensitized, and they even start getting sick.
Okay, now you talked a little bit about the symptoms of animals. What about humans?
The humans themselves will start showing, if you're talking about the health symptoms, they'll start showing, some people have a dermatitis problem. They'll start breaking out in hives. They'll start having rashes. They'll start clawing themselves. Some people will start having the white around their eye turning red. You'll start noticing a lot of black underneath their eyes. And that's not makeup they're wearing.
Oh, yeah.
But they'll start turning black around their eyes. Coughing, wheezing, runny nose, constant runny noses, and sometimes even headaches, blurriness of the eyes.
Oh, really? All that's associated?
It's all associated with it. There's an extremely long list, and fatigue is one of them. If you don't feel that you're tired all the time, it may be the environment you're living in.
And now, if someone has those symptoms and they go to a doctor, and does he usually say, let's check the mold in your house, or is it misdiagnosed more than?
It's a good question, and unfortunately, the majority of times it is misdiagnosed. The government does not regulate the mold industry, so they don't have any type of numbers that state that this mold at this level is going to cause some severe damage. The doctors are not associated with molds because they're doctors. So basically what they do is they say, oh, you have pollen or allergies. Take this Allegra, take this medication. And it's misdiagnosed. And that, by the time they start getting to a point where their lungs are full of it, the Allegra's not going to work. They got mold balls, and that's when it turns into the flu. So the majority of times it is misdiagnosed.
Mold balls?
It's actually mold balls.
In your lungs?
In your lungs, right.
Wow.
Yes, sir.
Wow. Can you cough those up, or?
No, once they're in there, unfortunately. They can x-ray, and on the x-ray it'll show these big round circles.
Wow.
In the lungs.
And how do they treat that?
Once they determine what it is, then they have to treat it with certain medicines but I would suggest going to an environmental doctor.
Okay.
For your chances.
So there's a difference in just a regular general practitioner than an environmental doctor.
Correct.
And then, do you talk to environmental doctors? They ever contact you and say, look, I think we got a mold problem? Or?
No, sir. What happens is they recommend to the patient, you have an environmental problem in your home. Call someone, have them test the problem. Once they get the results back, the lab will actually have the molds that are found and the levels, and then they take that back to the doctor, and he's able to diagnose it and give them the proper medication.
We're going to take a break in just a couple of seconds, but I want to talk about, first of all, the worst case of mold you've found. We're not talking about Jason's apartment, but the worst case of mold you've had and how much it affects our schools. Is it pretty much throughout our schools, especially the older school buildings?
Believe it or not, schools are a major problem, and I could probably talk for hours on the schools. Major problem, and a lot of kids are being misdiagnosed with ADD and mental. I mean, the ability of their learning ability, and basically what it boils down to is the mold that they have in these schools, or cause them to have their memory losses and things of that nature.
We're going to take a break right here. We'll be right back, and we'll have more on the mold.
Yeah, it was a young family, and the wife was 6 months pregnant, and I went in and did this job, and I found the black mold stacking at an elevated rate.